In the heart of a forgotten city, where shadows danced and secrets whispered, there was a circus fighting for survival known as the Ragged Troupe. Its tents were torn up, the performers were tired, and the once magnificent spectacle was now just murmuring applause. Desperate for the spark of life, the owner of the circus, Mr. Montague, came across a rumor about a mysterious puppeteer who had enchanted puppets. The legends talked about their supernatural abilities and the power they possessed to captivate the audience. With a glimmer of hope burning in his eyes, Mr. Montague went in search of the puppeteer. After days of searching, he came across a dilapidated crew hidden in a scary forest. As he creaked through the door, he discovered an old puppeteer named Victor with a sinister smile on his face. Victor, dressed in torn clothes and decorated with intricate tattoos, welcomed Mr. Montague to his home. The air became heavy with anticipation when Victor presented his menagerie of puppets. Each doll had an aura of unearthly beauty, their thin threads sparkled with supernatural energy. The puppeteer made an offer. If Mr. Montague agreed to include his puppets in the circus, Victor promised a show beyond imagination, a genre that would restore the glory of the shabby troupe. Desperate and hypnotized by the charismatic presence of a puppeteer, Mr. Montague accepted, unaware of the dark power he was inviting into their world. As night fell, the circus tent was buzzing with anticipation. The spectators, who did not suspect the action of the evil forces, took their places, their hearts beating with anticipation. The great performance began and the puppets glided across the stage with unearthly grace. Their movements were fascinating, eliciting sighs of awe and wonder from the crowd. But as the show progressed, the charm turned into something more sinister. The delicate faces of the porcelain puppets were deformed into grotesque masks, their eyes burned with an unholy light. The audience, once hypnotized, felt the icy touch of the soul as the strings of the puppets stretched, squeezing them deeper into the arms of the puppeteer. As the night drew to a close, the circus embraced the horror. The puppets revealed their true nature, their movements became more and more disordered and unnatural. Their graceful limbs stretched and curved, exposing sharp claws under the porcelain exterior. The spectators, now helpless and paralyzed, turned into lifeless wooden puppets. The once jubilant crowd turned into a frightening manifestation of Victor's power over their souls. In this chaos, several members of the shabby troupe managed to escape the influence of the puppeteer. They united, motivated by the desperate desire to recover their friends and free the trapped souls. Armed with determination and remnants of hope, they plunged into the labyrinth of the circus, following the echo of an obsessive laugh and the call of a siren of perverted melodies. But when they dared to go further, they met the puppeteer himself. Victor, who controlled his puppets like an evil maestro, reveled in chaos and despair. His eyes shone with madness as he appreciated the suffering inflicted on the circus and its artists. The troupe, facing the superior forces of the enemy, valiantly fought Victor's puppets. They held burning torches in their hands, their light cast long shadows on the territory of the haunted circus. But the puppets, powered by an unholy force, turned out to be formidable opponents, their porcelain limbs dissecting the air with frightening precision. In the climactic battle, the surviving members of the shabby troupe unleashed their collective strength. With an impulse of disobedience, they tore the threads that bound the cursed puppets, destroying the control that Victor had over them. The dolls collapsed to the ground, lifeless and inert. When the last doll fell, silence reigned on the territory of the circus. The once captive souls, freed from their wooden prisons, returned to their human forms, their eyes were full of confusion and gratitude. A shabby troupe, covered with bruises and blows, but victorious, stood among the rubble of the puppeteer's menagerie. The haunted circus, mutilated forever by the encounter with the puppeteer, has finally found salvation. The remains of the puppets were burned and the circus tent demolished, his cursed memories buried in the past. The survivors parted in different directions, taking with them the heartbreaking story of the puppeteer's menagerie, an instructive story that was whispered in the darkest corners of.
The moon cast a strange reflection on the deserted streets of the city when a thick fog rolled in, enveloping everything in an ethereal haze. The air crackled with anticipation as rumors of a creepy circus spread among the residents of the city. They were talking about a creepy circus, a legendary circus that appeared only once in a century, promising an unforgettable spectacle of horror and surprise. Seized with morbid curiosity, the townspeople gathered near an old, forgotten fair on the outskirts of the city. Under a large tent, The audience anxiously waited for the premiere, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. The circus was bathed in darkness, the only light coming from flickering lanterns casting ominous shadows on the worn, tattered canvas. The opening notes of the haunting music echoed through the tent, making the audience shudder. Suddenly the stage came alive with a group of acrobats, their bodies moving in artificial curves. Bones cracked and twisted as they defied the laws of anatomy, their every movement evoking a sense of terror. Gasps of horror and disbelief filled the air as the acrobats performed actions that should have been impossible. Then the clowns appeared, their faces hidden behind grotesque masks that seemed to have a life of their own. Their laughter was a cacophony of madness, their smiles were unnaturally wide, and their eyes were full of malice. They frolicked among the audience, their movements were erratic and disturbing, turning joy into horror. A magician appeared on the stage, waving a curved wand and a deck of antique cards. He brilliantly created illusions that distort reality. Community volunteers were selected and subjected to horrors beyond their worst nightmares. They screamed and begged for release, but their pleas were met with sadistic pleasure on the part of the magician. With the onset of night, the boundary between the viewer and the performer was erased. The audience was trapped in a nightmarish circus, unable to escape from the clutches of a terrible circus. The tent turned into a maze of winding corridors, moving walls and secret passages. Frightened screams echoed through the air, drowned out by the maniacal laughter of clowns. Despair grew as the residents of the city realized that they were pawns in a sadistic game. They formed small groups, desperately looking for a way out, but each turn only led to more horror. They came across rooms filled with grotesque quirks, jars with deformed creatures, shelves lined with dismembered dolls, and cages in which deranged artists lived. Delving into the heart of the circus, they discovered the truth behind the terrible circus. The circus was not a simple performance, it was the gateway to another realm, the realm of nightmares and malice. The spectacle was a ritual, an offering to dark entities that fed on fear and suffering. In the depths of the circus, they finally encountered the master of the skating rink, a figure of sinister elegance who reveled in their torment. His voice oozed sweet malice as he revealed his true nature, a creature from the ancient darkness who staged a circus to satisfy his insatiable appetite for fear. But a glimmer of courage rose in the ranks of the frightened townspeople. They gathered together, determined to fight the horrors that surrounded them. They refused to be consumed by fear. United, they tried to break the ritual and banish the ringmaster to the kingdom from where he came. A fierce battle ensued, in which the inhabitants of the city fought with possessed clowns, acrobats with superhuman strength and evil magic of the trackmaster. Despite everything, they managed to break the dark ritual, causing the circus to collapse around them. When the tent collapsed, reality again prevailed over the townspeople. They stumbled in the morning light, out of breath and downtrodden, but victorious. The creepy circus has disappeared, leaving behind only the ruins of a nightmare. The residents returned to their homes, forever haunted by the horrors they witnessed, vowing never to talk about the circus again. But deep down they knew that the nightmares of the creepy circus would go on forever, reminding them of the thin veil between reality and the perverted realm of their darkest fears. And if the circus ever returns, they will be ready to face its horrors again, armed with the power born of surviving a nightmare.
Deep in the heart of the small town of Ravenswood, a heavy foreboding has landed in the air. For years, the city has hosted a thriving circus known as the Carnival of Wonders. But one fateful night, the circus suddenly closed its doors, leaving behind an abandoned big top that served as a chilling reminder of its former glory. Legend had it that the circus was struck by a dark curse, which condemned it to eternal darkness and unspeakable horrors. Stories of mysterious disappearances, ghostly phenomena, and otherworldly sounds circulated among the townspeople, causing murmurs of fear and awe. It was in the midst of this icy atmosphere that a group of brave teenagers known as the Ravenswood Explorers appeared. Eager to unravel the mysteries surrounding the abandoned big top, they have planned a midnight expedition determined to discover the truth behind the legends. As the clock struck midnight, flooding the city with a frightening glow, the explorers made their way to an abandoned carnival ground. The moon hung ominously in the sky, its pale light casting ghostly shadows on rusty rides and crumbling tents. They entered the big top slowly, their hearts beating frantically in their chests. The air inside was stale and the space was shrouded in a veil of darkness. The creaking of the floors and the distant commotion of invisible creatures intensified their growing anxiety. The first signs of the supernatural were felt when a gust of wind passed through the empty stands of the circus, taking with it the faint echoes of the children's laughter. The researchers exchanged nervous glances, realizing that they were not alone. Suddenly, a flickering spotlight illuminated the center of the ring, highlighting the figure standing there, dressed in the torn costume of the ride director. Her pale face was adorned with a crooked smile, and her eyes burned with a wicked light. The voice of the ride director echoed through the empty space, making its way to the bones of those who heard him. "Welcome, daredevils, to the Carnival of Wonders," hummed the director of the merry-go-round, with an obsessive melody in his voice. "You have opened the door to your own death." The researchers, filled with a mixture of fear and determination, made progress. They plunged into the darkness, stumbling over the remains of the circus past, a forgotten cage with a lion, a mutilated acrobat figure and traces of discarded clown shoes. Each step brought them closer to the evil spirits that inhabited the abandoned Big Top. The spirits of the fallen artists, locked in their ghostly forms, rose from the shadows, their eyes were full of anguish. They whispered mourning stories about their tragic fate, their voices were barely audible because of the frightening music that swirled in the air. The researchers came across a secret room adorned with ornate mirrors that seemed to reflect distorted reflections of their own fears. As they slowly approached, the mirrors began to deform, revealing grotesque reflections that attracted them to get closer. Unable to resist a strange charm, the explorers were dragged into the mirrors one by one, their frightened screams echoing into oblivion. They found themselves locked in a distorted kingdom, their own reflections turned against them in a nightmare house of laughter. However, he remains a researcher, Sarah, the fearless leader of the group. Determined to free her friends and put an end to the persecution, she came face to face with the evil director of the merry-go-round. Gathering all her bravery, she demanded that he release his companions and lift the curse that held the abandoned Big Top in his vice. The evil laugh of the ride director filled the room as he appreciated Sarah's disobedience. He revealed the truth behind the curse: the circus was built on top an ancient burial ground, and the spirits of the intoxicated dead sought revenge for their defiled resting place. Sarah, swept away by a tide of bravery, vowed to correct the mistakes of the past. She dared to penetrate into the heart of the cursed circus, collecting forgotten relics and performing a sacred ritual to appease the vengeful spirits. As she spoke the ancient words, the abandoned Big Top trembled and a dazzling light enveloped everything around. The evil smile of the ride director turned into a horror mask when the curse was lifted, freeing the spirits and driving them into the depths of darkness. When the lights finally went out, Sarah found herself standing among her friends and their eyes wide with awe and gratitude. They knew that they owed their lives to his courage and determination. Since that day, the abandoned Big Top has become the symbol of victory over the darkness, a reminder that even the most terrible curses can be destroyed. The Ravenswood explorers will always hold their heads high, knowing that they have faced the ghosts of the abandoned Big Top and emerged victorious.